There are moments in history that don't explode, they recede. A sentence disappears, a standard softens, a line once drawn in ink becomes pencil. No sirens, no smoke, just the quiet sound of something protective being folded away. We've learned to celebrate growth as if it were salvation, growth of markets, growth of extraction, growth of output. We say the word growth the way older civilizations said harvest, with reverence. But harvest required tending, harvest required restraint. Harvest required knowing when enough was enough and leaving something in the field so the soil could recover. Now, enough is a threat. Enough slows expansion. Enough unsettles investors. Enough suggests a ceiling, and ceilings are intolerable to an economy built on sky. So we choose the dollar, not because we're villains, but because we're afraid. Afraid of contraction, afraid of instability, afraid of discomfort, afraid that if the line on the graph dips, everything else will collapse with it. Fear, when dressed in spreadsheets, looks like prudence. Greed, when wrapped in patriotic language, sounds like duty. And duty is difficult to argue against. There's something almost ritualistic about the exchange being made. We trade tomorrow for quarterly reassurance. We trade atmosphere for margin. We trade coral and coastline and seasonality for temporary calm on a trading floor. We convince ourselves it's temporary. We convince ourselves the losses are manageable. We convince ourselves the system will adjust before the consequences compound. The earth does not protest, it absorbs. It absorbs heat, it absorbs carbon, it absorbs the assumption that it will continue to absorb without consequence. But accumulation is not forgiveness, it is accounting. And accounting in ecological systems does not reset at the end of the fiscal year. It compounds across decades, across generations, across species that have no voice in the room where decisions are made. We pretend that money is tangible. We speak of it as if it were solid, like stone, like metal, like something that exists independent of belief. But the dollar is an agreement. It's confidence. It's trust that tomorrow others will honor what we honor today. Air is not an agreement. Soil is not an agreement. They are chemical realities. They don't care about sentiment or spin or short-term political wins. You cannot negotiate with rising temperature the way you negotiate a tariff. You cannot deregulate physics. You cannot rescind thermodynamics. You cannot issue a press release to the jet stream, right? You can only delay the moment when the bill arrives, and delay has a way of multiplying what it postpones. And when it does arrive, it won't be mailed to shareholders. It will not be absorbed by quarterly write-offs. It will be mailed to children. They will inherit coastlines that redraw themselves without permission, winters that hesitate, summers that linger too long and burn too bright. They will inherit insurance systems that retreat, food systems that strain, migration patterns that shift, not because of ideology, but because of heat and drought and flood. They will inherit a vocabulary of once unprecedented that becomes routine, and they will ask, not necessarily in rage, but in bewilderment, why urgency attached itself to profit, but patience attached itself to survival, why the dollar was treated as sacred and the atmosphere as optional, why growth was defended with ferocity, while restraint was dismissed as weakness. There's a particular tragedy in mistaking abstraction for permanence. Markets fluctuate, currencies shift, empires dissolve. History is not gentle with financial systems that overreach. Yet we behave as if the architecture of this decade is more durable than the biosphere that supports it. We act as if quarterly performance outweighs geological time, as if liquidity were more essential than breath. The atmosphere does not campaign, it does not fundraise, it does not speak at press conferences, it simply responds. Heat rises, ice melts, storms gather, drought expands. Not as punishment, as process. And process is indifferent to ideology. It does not care who won the argument. It cares about energy, chemistry, and feedback loops. The planet has always known change. Ice ages came and receded long before we could measure them. Continents shifted before there were borders to draw. Cycles are not new. Movement is not new, but speed has a character. Scale has a signature. And there is a difference between the slow turning of deep time and the sharp acceleration of a species that can alter the chemistry of its own sky within a single lifetime. The Earth will endure, it always has. The question has never been whether the planet survives. The question has always been what kind of world remains livable for us. So what unsettles me is not disagreement. Civilizations have always argued about direction and power and resources. What unsettles me is the narrowing of imagination, the belief that the only viable future is the one that maximizes return, as if return were synonymous with survival, as if the ledger were more real than the lungs that breathe beneath it, as if the measure of a thriving nation were its market capitalization rather than the stability of its seasons. So we're living inside a wager that innovation will outpace consequence, a wager that markets will self-correct before ecosystems self-correct, a wager that we can extract now and repair later. And wagers can feel rational in the moment. They can feel bold, decisive, confident. History, however, is crowded with societies that mistook momentum for inevitability. They believed expansion guaranteed endurance, and it did not. The air does not care about our confidence. The ocean does not adjust its tides because we are uncomfortable with limits. The soil does not replenish because a boardroom voted for optimism. These systems operate on laws older than our currency and older than our institutions. They were here before our markets, and they will remain long after our economic theories are footnotes. If there is grief in this moment, it is not theatrical, it is structural. It is the grief of watching guardianship give way to appetite, the grief of seeing precaution reframed as obstruction, the grief of understanding that some reversals cannot simply be reversed again because the damage accumulates in layers, and layers are difficult to peel back without loss. The dollar can be printed. Forests cannot. Markets can recover. Extinct species do not. Confidence can be restored. A destabilized climate does not reset on command. And when the children of this era stand in whatever remains, breathing whatever remains, drinking whatever remains, they will not ask what the Dow closed at. They will not ask how efficient the quarter was. They will ask why survival was treated as negotiable, why the most priceless systems on Earth were placed on the bargaining table. And when this era is remembered, it will not be for its victories, but for what it quietly conceded to appetite.